Hi, everyone, and welcome to OT Echo. Today is December 11th, 2025, and today we have special guests for you. Emily Meise and Henry Hrdlicka is going to be presenting to you, and we're just really excited about this presentation. Today, after the meeting, we are going to have an informal meeting for anyone who's interested in volunteering for the 2026 January through June ECHO meeting. So please stay on if you are interested in volunteering. Emily and Henry would like for everyone to wait for their questions until the end. If you're afraid you're going to forget the question, feel free to put it in the chat, but they will present and then they will answer all of the questions. So thank you everyone for your commitment to continuing education and for being here today. We're just so thankful for everyone volunteering their time to be a part of OT Echo. So I'm going to let Emily and Henry introduce themselves, and thank you so much for coming.
Hi everyone, we're so excited to be here today. My name is Emily Meise and I'm an occupational therapist at Gaylord Hospital. I have about 15 years of experience as an occupational therapy practitioner specializing in brain injury and stroke rehabilitation. And today I'm co-presenting with Dr. Henry Hrdlicka, our Director of Research at Gaylord Specialty Healthcare's Milne Institute for Healthcare Innovation. Today we're excited to present on the validity and reliability testing of the Gaylord Occupational Therapy Cognitive Screen, also known as the GOT-Cog, which is a novel cognitive screen for inpatient occupational therapy treatment planning. Today, we have no financial or personal conflicts of interest in relation to today's presentation. After today's presentation, we hope that attendees will be able to recognize the need for cognitive screening tools that reflect real-life function and support occupational therapy treatment planning across inpatient settings. We hope that you're able to describe the development and psychometric testing of the GOT-Cog, and then to be able to discuss the clinical implications of using the GOT-Cog to guide evidence-based, functionally oriented cognitive assessment and intervention in occupational therapy practice. So just a little background about our hospital. Gaylord Specialty Healthcare is a rehabilitation-focused nonprofit healthcare system. We provide outpatient rehab services at 6 clinics across Connecticut, along with inpatient services at Gaylord Hospital. Gaylord Hospital specifically is a 137-bed long-term acute care hospital, also known as an LTAC, located in Wallingford, Connecticut, and we're comprised of 6 inpatient units, 2 step-down progressive care units, 2 medically complex stroke and telemetry units, and 2 rehabilitation units focused in spinal cord injury, traumatic brain injury, stroke, and orthopedic rehab. So when completing an occupational therapy evaluation, some essential components to look at include looking at activities of daily living, instrumental activities of daily living, functional mobility and transfers, cognition, functional cognition, and physical deficits. Assessment of these areas really help to establish a treatment plan related to patients' individual needs. A patient's cognition and their functional cognition play an important role in their participation of daily activities, and it can be defined as the interaction of the patient's cognitive and processing skills needed to accomplish complex everyday tasks. So thinking of patients being able to bathe and dress themselves, their household tasks, financial and medication management, driving, and being able to maintain a job. So everyday activities are complex. Occupational performance requires a variety of skills for successful completion. And human beings perform complex activities in a variety of contexts under various conditions every day. When you think about you going home after work and you're cooking dinner after a long day, the TV might be on, your kids could be playing and arguing in the background, you're trying to organize and cook dinner, being able to find the items that you need to, being able to have awareness and self-monitoring skills to make that dinner, and then being able to interact with others while cooking, along with your emotional state. It can be very overwhelming for any of us. So if you have some occupational disruption, that can really impact that. So those with functional cognitive deficits can experience occupational disruption. They may have difficulty with things such as initiation, processing speed, being able to hold onto information and manipulate it, thinking and planning strategically, being able to correct their own errors, doing anything that might require a sequence to perform, and being able to live safely in the community. It also can have an impact on patients being able to maintain relationships. So those with cognitive challenges can, again, experience impaired independence with ADLs and IADLs, impaired safety, poor carryover, loss of job, poor communication with family, poor health management, impaired driving skills, and social isolation, just to name a few. So when you're assessing cognition, you can complete screens or assessments. The difference being a screen is a quick check to identify cognitive impairment, but it doesn't provide in-depth details. It can, however, flag the risk to determine if further evaluation is needed. And an assessment tool is a more comprehensive evaluation of specific cognitive domains, and it helps to aims to guide diagnosis, intervention planning, and functional impact. So there's many tools out there that can assess cognition. In terms of quick screens, there's assessments like the MOCA, SLUMS, the orientation log, or the COG log, just to name a few. And then there's also performance-based functional cognitive measures that you can complete in addition to the screens, such as the weekly calendar planning assessment, executive function performance test, the menu task, just again to name a few. Each of these measures had one or more barriers that limited their use in our long-term acute care setting. Some specific barriers that we faced were costly trainings to access and deliver the tools, the timing to administer the assessments, the cost for purchasing the assessments. And then we did find that some of the tools that are out there were a little bit more designed for community dwelling populations, or were designed as diagnostic tools for dementia or Alzheimer's with a heavy focus on memory. And some of them just lacked key domains of cognition relevant to patients seen at the LTAC level, and some just lacked relevancy to real-life scenarios. So in 2021, the Occupational Therapy Department here at Gaylord Hospital saw this need and approached the research department to create a new OT-derived cognitive screen called the Gaylord Occupational Therapy Cognitive Screen, also known as the GOT-Cog. Our goal was to create a screening tool to identify domains of concern in order to guide OT care planning and to identify the need for additional services like neuropsychology or speech therapy. The GOT-Cog contains 24 items representing 9 domains of cognition that are typically impacted by brain injury, stroke, and hospitalizations. The domains of cognition that we included specifically on GOT-Cog were verbal fluency, attention, orientation, delayed recall, visual and spatial skills, their divided attention, their auditory memory, their sequencing ability, and their functional problem-solving ability. So when you're using an assessment or a screening, you want to ensure that the tool is valid and reliable for use with your specific patient. Psychometric properties help to ensure the quality of the instrument used. So once the GOT-Cog was developed, we completed psychometric testing of the measure to include construct validity. So does the tool measure what it's supposed to measure, or the accuracy of the measure? We looked at rater reliability. So can the results be consistently reproduced, or the precision of the measure? And then we also looked at responsiveness of the measure, being able to show change over time, or the sensitivity of the measure. So I'm now going to turn the presentation over to Dr. Hrdlicka to discuss the psychometric properties of GOT-Cog.
Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Henry Hrdlicka. Due to some technical issues, we're sharing one camera right now, so Emily and I are going to be kind of going back and forth across the camera. So as Emily said, I'm going to be discussing the psychometric properties of GOT-Cog. And to start, I'm going to talk about construct validity. So construct validity, again, as Emily said, is a way of measuring does a measure test what you think it should test? Is it accurate? Is it, if we're making a cognitive measure, is it testing cognition in the domains that we want to test? So to do this, we conducted a randomized crossover controlled study. For this study, we used the St. Louis University Mental Status Exam, or the SLUMS exam, as our comparator. And for this study, because it was a crossover controlled design, participants were randomly given either the SLUMS or GOT-Cog during their initial occupational therapy exam. The following day, the second screen was delivered by the same or a different occupational therapy practitioner. Because this first study was focused on the validity and not rater reliability, we had some allowances to allow for different occupational therapy practitioners to give it day 1, day 2, though we try to be as consistent as possible. So looking at, first looking at the data, so we saw through this study, and I'm not going to highlight all the data from every study. We'll have QR codes at the end that folks can access our open access articles. But to summarize the construct validity piece, we found that GOT-Cog and slums both strongly demonstrated a strong positive correlation with an R value of 0.75. So in the scatter plot here on the right, we have GOT-Cog total scores on the y-axis going up and down, and slums total scores on the x-axis going left to right. So you can see through this scatter plot with the trend line that, again, that there's a strong positive correlation that we calculated with an R of 0.75. We also looked at not only total scores, but all the individual domains of both GOT-Cog and slums as well. Both GOT-Cog and slums shared several different domains, and we found that these shared domains also had positive correlation between tools, with R values ranging from 0.24 to 0.69. And then the two unique domains of GOT-Cog and the one unique domain of slums were also correlated. Because everything should be measuring cognition, we felt it was appropriate for convergent and divergent validity to then correlate these back to their both the native scales as well as the alternating scale. So in this case, the unique domains of GOT-Cog positively correlated to slums as well as itself, and vice versa. These R values range from 0.24 to 0.65. With this study, we also looked at, just as a control, if there were any ordering effects, education effects, or program effects. And what we found is that neither slums nor GOT-Cog in this first study demonstrated significant ordering effects. So did scores differ if it was delivered first or second in the sequencing? If there was education effects, so depending if a patient had or participant had a high school level of education or greater, or less than high school level of education. And then we also looked at program specific differences, because our total scores in our study was purposely designed to look at a general medically complex population. So we did a sub-analysis to start to look and question, does one domain or one diagnosis or program respond differently? And in this initial study, we found that between the slums and the GOT-Cog that there were no program specific effects. We're exploring this a little bit more right now, but don't want to give too much away there. Looking then at rater reliability, so if you were to give GOT-Cog multiple times, is it consistent? To do this, we used a repeated measure design where GOT-Cog was delivered 3 times, twice at admission, over 2 consecutive days, and again at discharge. Inter-rater reliability was tested if the first 2 assessments were collected by different investigators, and intra-rater reliability was tested if the first 2 assessments at admission were collected by the same investigator. Responsiveness then was evaluated using the first assessment collected at admission, and then the final assessment collected at discharge. So to give a very high level summary, we were able to determine that GOT-Cog demonstrated moderate to good inter-rater reliability. Again, that's when it was delivered twice between 2 different occupational therapy practitioners, and good to excellent intra-rater reliability when it was delivered twice by the same occupational therapy practitioner. And the table below is just some summary data from this study. So we have day 1 assessment and day 2 assessment, so shown as the mean and 95% confidence interval. And then in the third column is what is called the interclass correlation coefficient, or ICC value, and the ICC 95% confidence interval. It's really this ICC metric that allows us to determine if a measure is reliable along with its 95% confidence interval. And that's why in the interpretation we have a range of moderate to good, good to excellent. It's based off that 95% confidence interval, which is then supported by the Spearman and Pearson Spearman correlations shown by the R values of 0.1 and 0.86. And then while the initial goal was just to help develop a tool that could be used to assess and determine what kind of treatment, to assess and support treatment planning for occupational therapy, we also asked the question of, could GOT-Cog be sensitive to change over time? And what we were able to find is that GOT-Cog demonstrated a significant 2.3 point change over a mean of 22.6 days. This translated to a Cohen's d of or an effect size of 0.4, which is usually translated or interpreted as a small effect size. And this was comparable to our historical slums data, which demonstrated an average of 2.4 point change over 24 days. Again, this is translated to was found to be an effect size of 0.5, which is usually interpreted as a medium effect size. So I'm done talking about the math portion of this. I'm going to turn it back over to Emily, who's going to talk more specifically and give us some examples of what the GOT-Cog looks like.
All right, I'm coming back in. So when we created the GOT-Cog, we broke up the examiner and patient packet for it. This is part of our examiner packet. It's 4 pages long. We designed the measure to assess verbal fluency and attention first to ensure that the patients have the communicative ability to participate. And then we move on to attention and to make sure that they can actually attend to the tasks for administration. Only then do we move on to orientation of the patient to time, place, and situation to assess that. And then once we get through orientation, we move to providing the patient with their patient packet to allow them to view a grocery list. So I'm going to go to that next page. This is page 3 and 4 of our examiner packet. So there is an auditory memory and attention portion. You can see it on page 3 of the assessment, where the patient is read a story with distractors. And the patient then has to recite the story back as best as they can, identifying key components to achieve points for this section. The GOT-Cog also assesses functional problem solving through medication and money management tasks. Clients are also able to solve these problems with pen and paper without having to rely on working memory alone, like the grocery task on the slums, if anyone's familiar with that one. So this is the beginning of our patient packet. So we tried to add design elements and prompted instructions to the GOT-Cog to accommodate clients with visual and perceptual deficits, which is really common post-stroke and brain injury, as well as our demographics typically seen at the LTAC setting. You can see this through the larger print that we have on the grocery list and our larger clock. Clients with upper extremity weakness or deficits due to spinal cord injury or other conditions can also complete the GOT-Cog. There is a score modifier that was purposefully built into the measure. These modifications make the GOT-Cog an accessible and appropriate tool for the LTAC setting, especially those recovering from stroke or brain injury with the potential for a neglect or a visual field deficit. Similar to the MoCA in the slums, the GOT-Cog assesses both immediate and short-term delayed recall. Unlike the MoCA in the slums, which don't provide a measure of times between priming and recall, the GOT-Cog specifically evaluates how well a patient can retain and recall information after a minimum 10-minute delay. So we usually give the patient the grocery list. They're able to look at it for a minute. We then take it away and then ask them immediately, what do you recall? They don't get any points for that piece, but then we ask them again in that 10 minutes. This time frame was agreed upon through input from the neuropsychologists on our original Delphi-style expert panel used to evaluate the content validity of GOT-Cog. This minimal time interval was suggested as it's a more accurate reflection of true short-term memory function and its potential impact on daily activities. You can see that we put visual anchors here on the modified trail making task and larger images for sequencing to accommodate those with visual field cuts, neglects, or just people with low vision in general. And this is continuing with our patient packet. You can see that we made our images a little bit larger and we allow for the patient to solve the medication management problem, solving questions with pen and paper, not just depending on their working memory alone to solve the problem. And then in terms of the coins, we not only included the pictures of the coins, but we also added the names of the coins to eliminate dependency on vision alone to adding the pocket change. Before moving on to the case report, if there's any questions, we'd love to take them at this point.
Yes, feel free to put any questions in the chat. If not, we will have Emily start reading the case study.
Bring your mouse to here. Open up the chat.
So we do have one question, and that is, how do we access the tool?
That's a great question. We actually have QR codes coming up at the end that you guys can scan to access all our publications and access to the training for the tool to obtain it.
Also share it with Kate.
Yeah, we can also share it with you, Kate, if you want to send it out to the group too.
Great, thank you. We post the recording of the session on the OT Echo platform, so we
Okay.
can also provide a link if you want there.
Oh, perfect. What are common challenges of using the tool and how to overcome it? Um, I guess one of the big ones I feel like I always run into is people that are hard of hearing. I think that's the hardest part because on some points you can't repeat things. So I guess making sure patients have like their hearing aids in before administering it. Some other things to think about too is your patients are just coming in from like, at least with us, they were just coming from acute care hospitals. So making sure that they're not still like in a delirium, that they slept well that night. Being wary of if a patient has like a urinary tract infection, as that can impact their cognitive ability, medications, that kind of stuff. And then I think I missed a question above. It says, is there any training and certification program to administer? We do have a short video. It's like 15 minutes long. It's about 15 minutes long. You watch us actually administer the measure, and then you can access it. There's a couple questions to get it like a certification. It's good for 2 years.
Yeah, we recommend, similar to the slums. Hi, this is Dr. Hrdlicka. We do recommend, similar to the slums and the MOCA, every 2 years, just a refresher. We have developed as Emily said, a external video that you can, a video and a questionnaire just to kind of check for understanding. But we're working on also other versions of that too, just to make it more accessible.
Yeah. What is the best time to use it for a patient? Here in the LTAC space, we assess everybody that comes through our doors with it. It's our cognitive measure of choice. Just to make sure, because not every single patient that comes through our doors has speech therapy services. So we just want to make sure we're not missing anything. So we have a 3-day eval period. So we usually give it within the first 3 days if it's appropriate to a patient.
One more question just came in. What was the age bracket for the patients you administered the tool?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, in the studies we recruited anyone who was either 18 to 95, I think or 18 to 90, excuse me. So that was just for the study purposes, but now in practice we deliver it to any of our patients. It's just for the validation we limited to 18 and older and individuals under the 90 or younger.
Great, thank you. Well, why don't we move into the case study? Oh, one more question. Is it available in any other languages?
I can.
Yeah, I was going to say I can speak to that one.
So we are working with a few different groups internationally to translate and culturally validate the measure. We worked with individuals, a group out of Spain as well as Turkey. We are very open to other collaborations and opportunities as well. We would like to see it as accessible and as widely available as possible.
Yeah. How different is it from the MOCA? So we had actually been using the MOCA here going back like 6 years ago, but then they were moving towards kind of like a costly certification for our staff, and we have a staff of like 20 OTs. To get everybody certified was going to be very expensive. And I think it was like every 1 or 2 years they were requiring that training with the payment. But so the difference there being our measures free right now, but then also the big ones is we tried to add as much functional components as we could to our measure. We tried to put in visual anchors, which aren't always necessarily available on the MOCA. We had put in like a larger clock for patients. I don't know if you remember the MOCA, it's in like a little smaller area for the patients to actually draw it in. We tried to not to just solely focus on the memory aspect, but also pull in that like functional problem solving.
Yeah, I think
I'm trying to think of I'm trying to remember the MOCA because I haven't administered that one in a while because we've been using GOT-Cog for so long.
Yeah, I think too, just it's in general, talking with our staff and then others who have trialed it, it comes down to the functional piece, and that it was intentionally designed for the inpatient setting. So giving a full page for clock drawing was something that it becomes in a 2x2 square, it becomes a measure of hand grip and function versus cognition. So that's and then I see, is there any payment requirement for this tool and certification? No, there is not.
No, we wanted to keep it free for other occupational therapy practitioners to access. So.
Yeah. And our institution, Gaylord, has been very supportive of helping us to make sure that it remains free. So that's something that we're dedicated to doing.
Well, thank you so much. We certainly appreciate free tools, so it's much appreciated.
Yeah. And then I see, is it basically designed for inpatient or outpatient settings? So we're currently seeking sites to actually help to validate it in outpatient setting, but currently it's validated right now for the long-term acute care hospital. We're working with inpatient rehab facilities too to work on a validation study as well.
We may need, for OIS, we might need some additional, it is based on long-term acute care, how much longer, if you were to define?
So like our typical our typical length of stay is what I'm kind of thinking it was. So our typical length of stay is about 24, 25 days, depending on patient diagnosis. So like our stroke and brain injury patients, the average length of stay is about 24 days, depending on like if they're commercial insurance, Medicare, all that kind of stuff. But, yeah. Patients environmental.
So the question is it friendly to patients' environmental assessment as well?
Like using it in conjunction with like performance-based assessment as well. I'm thinking.
Timothy, do you want to come off mute and explain that a little bit more? Is it friendly to patients? Yeah, I'm not sure what he meant by that.
Yeah. We usually use this one as like, it's like our first, within the first like 3 days, again, we'll administer this. And then if we think that we need to do more in-depth assessment, we'll move on to like functional performance-based measures too. Okay. I know they keep popping in. No time specification for patients to complete it. The measure takes about 15 minutes to administer. 12 to 15 minutes.
12 to 15.
Yeah, 12 to 15.
And another question, can it be useful in mental health?
It could be. We haven't, I'll be honest, we haven't assessed it in the mental health realm, but we're open to it.
To add on to that, it was designed as a screening tool, so we can't say that it's diagnostic.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing, is that it can help identify potential deficits, but because we didn't compare it, say, to the DSM-5, we can't say that what we're measuring can be we didn't validate it specifically for a diagnostic criteria, so it is more of a screening tool. So that's just kind of the caveat there. So we are looking at potentially introducing it to our neuropsychology clinic, just as a screening tool there. But again, it's a screening tool, not a diagnostic tool.
But still incredibly useful, right? Because if you give it as a screening tool and then you see there's any problems, then you know that you need further assessment. So very useful either way.
Especially because we give it to every patient.
And we give it to every patient. And then two, it gives us insight into what to kind of look out for when we get the patient into the kitchen. Like, hey, if they're demonstrating memory issues on the GOT-Cog, then hey, they might not remember to turn a burner off. Like, so kind of putting it back to that functional piece too.
Great. Should we move into the case study now?
Yeah. Just exit out. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Let me get that out. There we go. Okay, so we're going to meet Mr. John D., who is a 58-year-old male admitted to a long-term acute care hospital following an acute right MCA CVA. He is presenting with left-sided weakness, left neglect, and cognitive changes. He had previously worked as a financial analyst and lived independently with his spouse. He was admitted to Gaylord Hospital's inpatient young stroke program to address mobility, self-care, and cognitive deficits affecting his functional independence. And his personal goal was to get back to work and to be able to drive again. The GOT-Cog was administered on day 2 of evaluation in a quiet setting within the inpatient therapy gym to eliminate any distractions. It took about 15 minutes to administer, and the GOT-Cog assessed his orientation and attention, his verbal fluency and working memory, his executive functioning skills, and his sequencing ability. It looked at his immediate and short-term delayed recall, and it looked at aspects of functional cognition through medication and money management tasks. Mr. John was alert, cooperative, and was oriented to person and place, but he did require minimal verbal cues for date and situation. During the testing, he required occasional redirection to task, became mildly fatigued by the end of testing, and had demonstrated some frustration when tasks became challenging. He did also appear to have a lack of insight into the severity of his deficits. Mr. John scored a 14 on the GOT-Cog, indicating a severe impairment impacting his functional performance. For orientation, he was able to correctly identify person and place, but he did require assistance for date and situation. For his attention and his working memory, he needed some repetition of verbal items, was unable to accurately repeat a 4-digit sequence backwards, and demonstrated reduced mental flexibility. In terms of his visual perception and spatial awareness, he had difficulty with clock drawing, omitting the entire left side of the clock, and then also demonstrated difficulty with trail making, suggesting a left neglect and impaired visual scanning. He struggled with organization on the executive function portion, and difficulty with reasoning during medication management, earning no points, and his errors reflected poor planning and sequencing. For his memory, he had a difficult time recalling items from the grocery list after a 10-minute delay, indicating deficits in delayed recall and use of his compensatory memory strategies. And for his insight, he underestimated his deficits a lot and kind of downplayed them. So Mr. John's profile is consistent with a typical right MCA CVA, including that left neglect, that impaired self-awareness, and executive dysfunction affecting his safety, his attention, and his memory. The GOT-Cog results can help to directly inform occupational therapy treatment planning, highlighting the need for interventions targeting functional attention, his visual scanning, his executive strategies, and some self-awareness training within real-world contexts. So I did provide some facilitation questions here. So when you guys go into your chats, I want you to think about how might Mr. John's cognitive and perceptual deficits affect his participation in daily activities and therapy sessions. What would be some treatment priorities for an OT interventions to address his identified areas of deficits? What other cognitive or perceptual assessments would you consider to further evaluate his abilities after performing the GOT-Cog? How can occupational therapy address his limited insight and help to promote safe carryover of strategies across settings? How might you use the GOT-Cog over time to measure progress or support discharge recommendations? And then considering his background as a financial analyst, how might you tailor cognitive rehabilitation to restore complex executive functions relevant to his work roles?
Great. Well, thank you so much. And before everyone goes into their breakout rooms, if you could please remember to keep your cameras on, it really helps with the conversation. And then we'll discuss these case studies, and then we'll come back as a large group. Thank you, everyone.
Well, welcome everyone from the breakout rooms. And let's go for the first question. How might Mr. Jones' cognitive and perceptual deficit affect his participation in daily activities and therapy sessions? David, would you like to help us with this question? You have to unmute yourself.
Sorry, David, you're on mute.
How's that?
We're fine. Go on.
Okay. One thing we said is that this is a screening tool, and some of the things we talked about in the case study refer to evaluation. So sometimes it would not be so relevant, but we did feel that we did have to look at these left neglect, safety issues, modification of activities. We talked about some of the other tools. People suggested the Texas and the Claudia Allen for assessing executive function. And they also felt that we have to really put a lot of emphasis on working memory. But that would be very important for his work as a financial analysis.
Thank you very much. How about you, Kelsey?
Dennis, can you just, are we on question one? When it cut in, you were already speaking.
Yeah, we're on
Okay.
question.
Okay, perfect. So our group talked about that there can be unsafe actions in daily living, specifically because he has very limited insight. One example that our group gave was bumping into doorways and not clearing environmental obstacles because they're not scanning appropriately.
Okay, thank you very much. How about we hop to the second question, which is, what would be your treatment priorities in OT interventions to address Mr. Jones' identified areas of deficit? Um, Eunice, would you like to answer that question for us?
Sorry, I think I'm losing you with my internet connection. We are in question one or question two?
On question two?
From what we came up with, we agreed on you prioritize emotional support of John because of the challenges that he actually faced. So we help him understand or even help using the caregivers or the family to give him emotional support. That's what we discussed on.
Thank you very much. How about you? Evidence or Igaba?
Okay, yes, we talked about step-by-step sequencing, encouraging errorless learning, problem-solving tasks, and structured routines. And we also talked about going back to work, although it's a long-term goal, but would work on that to achieve going back to work, and then looking for his hobbies and his own goals and leisure activities that he could also engage in.
Thank you very much. Shall we go to Timothy for question number 3? What other cognitive or perceptual assessments would you consider to further evaluate Mr. Jones' abilities? I'm afraid Timothy has been kicked off. So, how about you continue with this question, Evidence?
Okay. We talked about using the BERS test, also using the assessment of motto and using the assessment of model and process scale. Yeah, that was basically what we talked about. And then we talked about some other assessment too that is actually difficult to get. But yeah, and we also talked about the executive function performance text to ascertain real-world execution and functions.
Thank you very much. Did any of the group had the chance to go with the rest questions, 4, 5, and 6?
6.
Okay, do you want to go on with number 6 evidence?
Oh, number 4, right?
Okay, yeah.
Okay. We talked about awareness training, evaluation of the environment, the environmental context, safety concerns, because that's actually an important part. Then bringing out things that could, we talked about introducing a scenario to introducing scenarios that could help in the improvement of real life tasks. So yeah, that was what we talked about. And we also talked about how would enable him to navigate places in the home and orientation.
Thank you very much. How about you, David? David?
Did say it might be useful to present him with the results of the screening tool at the beginning and then further on, so he could see the functional differences. That was one suggestion they made to provide carryover and improve his limited insight.
And
Okay,
in the chat, Jasmine just noted that video feedback can also be given to correct mistakes.
wonderful. Does any from Timothy's team want to tell us what they talked about in any of the questions? Okay.
All right, well, thank you so much, everyone, for this conversation. And we really appreciate this presentation. Henry and Emily, you guys are great presenters, very engaging. Thank you for this. And I will be posting the recording of this up on OT Echo probably within 24 hours. So thank you, everyone, so much for coming. And if you'd like to stay on for our meeting, we would love to have you.